Now, government has promised to rebuild Jagersfontein in the Free State following the collapse of a dam wall there last year. The flood left hundreds of people homeless. The Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, is visiting the area today, and my colleague, the senior reporter here at eNCA, Aviwe Mtila, is also there on the ground. Good afternoon, Aviwe. Welcome to today. I would guess the people of Jagersfontein have been waiting for such a high-level visit for some time, although their situation on the ground has not changed much since that dam wall collapsed in September last year.
But then I just keep losing your audio, but the Deputy President just left moments ago here after addressing the community members. Remember that it's been 8 months since that dam collapse at the Jagersfontein mine here, and what you can show for it basically is the 3 show houses that have built since. It's 164 families that have been left destitute here, and of course the promise is that in 6 months' time, that's by November, in fact they'll all be built houses. The other issue, of course, is tackling the water woes here. If you are to speak to some of these community members, they'll tell you that they haven't had a drop of water in the last 10 years, while depending, in fact, on the JoJo tanks to supply the water around here. But if you talk on the broader economic issues, it is also around the high levels of unemployment here. I remember having a conversation with the Premier of the Free State, Mtila, just a bit earlier on, who suggested that 96% of the population here is unemployed. And if you are to speak to the mine, also another conversation that I had, they'll tell you that they only employ about 70%. Well, 70% of the 90 employees, in fact, come from the community itself. But let me just get now word, of course, from the attorneys that represent some of those 164 families. And of course, they had the engagements with the Deputy President and other stakeholders. Let's start with Andries Nkume here. Andries, thank you for joining us at eNCA. Are you happy with the measures that have been mentioned here by the Deputy President, suggesting that in 6 months' time, some of those families, and I understand you represent 78, will have shelters over their roofs?
Look, I think the Deputy President made mention of the fact that he was here simply because of a service delivery issue that he and the President had discussed, to say he must go around the provinces and make sure that he gets word from people. But what we also realized is that the issue about the Jagersfontein disaster was an afterthought. What he also says is that he needs to emphasize the issue of people moving back into houses. And we say he should not do that simply because we have not been able to determine the toxicity of the land on which this sludge went through. We represent the municipality, and the municipality has allocated land on which people are supposed to be temporarily moved up until such time as we are able to litigate against the mine and get all the claims that the mine is supposed to settle for these people. Simply because the mine says people must come to it and settle with it. Now, when people come through to speak to the mine and settle with it, they sign off and state that no other claims will be settled over and above what the mine has settled. So therefore, that to us is daylight robbery, and we would want the mine to pay up until the last cent.
And how are the living conditions now of the people that were left destitute some 8 months ago when the dam collapsed?
The conditions are dire. We represent, amongst others, a principal who now has got to live in the backyard of somebody who has just allocated just a room, and the mine sometimes does not pay for the rentals that is due to this owner of the property. So it's getting worse by the day, and it's even embarrassing. People are not able to exercise basic human rights that they're supposed to, that they are entitled to.
Okay, let me quickly bring in Alex Spoor from Richard Spoor Incorporation. You represent 40 plus families here, and also some farmers that were impacted by the sludge that swept through here.
Yes.
Are you happy with the initiatives that have been mentioned by the Deputy President and the houses that are to be built for those families?
We're glad the Deputy President is here, but as for initiatives, it's far too ad hoc and not organized. There should be a process around this. Step one is it safe to return to the land? That requires a comprehensive toxicology report. It doesn't exist. It hasn't been produced. The second point, everybody wants houses. They've started building houses, show houses to show us. But if you don't answer the first question, you can't relocate people in an area where they are exposed daily to dust that gets pulled up by this, as well as water contamination in the area. Those are some of the issues. Some of the other issues that we see is there's no mention whatsoever from government of persons downstream and communities downstream. And we know farmers have been hit, and they were not represented here today. And the government should be concerned about these people and economic development downstream. The last thing really is to say it's about information and provision of information to people. A lot was said here about working with JD, the mine. But what government needs to recognize, we need to understand what is government's role here. JD, under their watch, this disaster happened. They are liable for this. They must make good on it. They were clearly negligent in allowing this incident to occur. What is government's role here? They need to hold these people accountable. And to do that is a multi-forum engagement. They have to engage with lawyers, but most importantly, they need to ensure that JD plays open cards. Give us the information. If you have nothing to hide, where is the toxicology reports? And possibly the last point to really note is there's a history to this mine. That history is prior to JD. We know this mine was in part ownership here with Renit in investments under Mr. Rupert's watch. We know that there were frequent violations, in particular of water use licenses. What are the government's intentions here? Are they going to pursue criminal conduct against these persons? We are dealing with an enormous environmental catastrophe, as well as people who died in this. There needs to be accountability here. It's not just civil accountability, it's from the state. Where is the criminal accountability here?
And maybe let me give you the parting words, Andries Ngome, just on the history of the mining town, built, of course, on the backbone of diamond mining. But you hear that 96% of the population is unemployed. Should that be the case?
That should not be the case. I think it speaks to what has been stated in the Zondo Commission to say that politicians are feeding themselves out of the mining benefits that emanate from mining towns. And we are supposed then to have interventions, again, by the very same politicians to seek and uplift the community's interests. Hence, all the time, all that I say is that courts should always remain our forums of last resort, simply because you can't be complaining to a politician who is a beneficiary from a mining community.
All right, thank you very much. Those two gentlemen represent, of course, at least 120 families here that, of course, have been impacted by the sludge that swept through Jagersfontein back in September. It's 8 months later, and only 3 show houses are available. The rest of the 164 families are told that by November, that's in 6 months' time, that you can expect then, of course, to be provided with houses that will provide shelters for them.
Thank you very much, Aviwe Mtila, there on the ground in Jagersfontein.